made this morning, and some staff recommended changes. So those changes are pretty much summarised in sections 141 to 148 of the report. We have just looking to probably make a couple of changes to the motion that was on the table, just as a result of the discussion this morning, that the motion that was on the board didn't reflect the decision around the regulatory efficiency and effectiveness task force. So shortly, a sort of a revised motion will come up, I think, with the Chair's approval. That was all I was really going to say on it. David might sort of want a couple of words on kind of what has changed.
I suppose the key themes of the changes, and it's a standard process for us to review subsequent to the draft budget being approved, is we've done a comprehensive review of our capital program for next year, and on page 50 you'll see that there are revisions there to deferring some projects out to 2018 and 19, and other changes that we have found through that revision for next year's capital program. The result is a reduction of our CapEx program by $11 million. That transpires to a reduction in our forecast depreciation and our interest costs, which has led to the surplus position of $1 million prior to this morning's meetings decisions. So happy to take any questions.
So just while that motion is coming up, essentially the effect of this morning's decisions are that forecast surplus is now back down to being zero balance, essentially.
Okay, Leo, you were in the middle of questioning. Did you want to continue? Pre-lunch? You done? Yep. Okay, Ange.
Thank you, Mayor Andrew. So on page 49 then, under the operating statement, so are you saying that something that's going up on the board soon is going to reflect that surplus/deficit as at June 2017? Is that what you... So that's going to change from 1 million balancing the books surplus to a deficit based on the two decisions we've just made? No.
No. So the three changes that are up there under it's been reflected under sort of the 1, 2, 3, the text in black. So what that is showing is that we're putting the $750,000 for parking revenue reduction into here. There's the $325,000 for the regulatory efficiency and effectiveness program, and then we're reducing the amount asked for 10-year plan by from $350,000 to $310,000 to balance that to zero. So there's neither a surplus nor a deficit now.
So on page 45, where this report has, since March, has identified a balancing the books surplus of $1 million, that will now
be zero. Yes.
144. So balancing the books. Oh, sorry, page 49, and it's under point 144. So the balancing, so I can correct my report. The balancing the books is zero.
Yes.
Gone from 1 million to zero.
Yes.
And the accounting result then goes to 8,617,000. Or no? I suppose it's different, isn't it?
It does. Yes, it does essentially do that. Yep.
It does essentially go down to 8.6. Okay.
Yep.
Cool. Just further down on that page on 147, the capital program, and you've got there amounted to 100.8 million, but in March it was 99.5 million. So is that, did I miss something between March and now? Was that a finance meeting rather? Did we add something on in the finance meeting? I mean, we're talking about almost, what are we talking about? 700,000? I'm on page 49, 147. It says the capital program presented in March, I'm assuming we're talking March annual plan point, was 100.8 million. But the report said 99.5 million, so that's like 1.3 million. No.
I can only assume that in reassessing the capital program and taking some there's a rounding of some sort, but we can look into that and come back to you.
Yeah, it's 1.3 million, yeah. Sorry, I shouldn't. So there's extra, so can you find out about that?
Sure.
That's not chump change, is it? Page 50, now there's just under the capital, I tried to follow through a lot of the CapEx program to have a look at all of those projects that you're now saying will be deferred to 18-19, so not done in this next financial year, done further. Most of them some of them that I could find were part projects, like the upgrade of the wastewater treatment plant was a $17 million project, you're only deferring 2.4. So are most of the others sort of part projects as well? We sort of picked this up at finance last week, I think, or whenever we had a finance meeting.
I'll probably defer to my colleagues whether they can answer that. But
Chris might be
just to
able
go back to your previous question, we've forgotten that we made that $1.2 million river plan amendment to the last.
Oh, so that's the river plan that's missing.
That gap is the river plan.
Okay, and so that will you'll pick that up when you bring the draft back on the end of the month. So yeah, page 50, Chris, they're your projects. Just trying to follow through. Are they majority of those you're wanting deferred part projects? So we've
yeah, the answer to your question is largely yes. The programs are working. It's just timing within that program.
Okay. And I know we were going to pick that up, I think, when we report. I think Tracy identified that through our finance meeting, because that's quite helpful to know whether it's part project or a full amount. Just on the other changes, just under that CapEx, the deferrals one, the other ones are you're bringing forward fire compliance, have no problem with that. The removal of Founders Theatre renewals, I suggested that we do that maybe 2 finance meetings ago, and there was a reason why we couldn't defer it, that we needed it, even though the building's closed. So why is that now there? Because I think the annual amount for set down is $390,000 per year for sort of basic maintenance of Founders.
I can't explain the difference of pulling it out now as opposed to before, but it's now deemed to be part of the long-term plan discussions.
And my recollection, and I am going off memory here, is that is the full amount. So does that mean there's not even $1,000 if the toilet floods or something like that for the theatre while it's closed? I mean, $390,000 seemed a lot anyway.
That would be covered in the operational
why I raised
maintenance to close it off. It's not being used at the moment.
So there's there will be no capital investment, I think is what the GM, but there is budgets for security, for ongoing maintenance, and there will be a small general budget for the property area broadly for broken windows and stuff like that to repair them. So,
but that's all under renewals.
That's correct.
Yeah. Okay. It's only a small amount, but what's the reduced tenancy inducements? Is that what?
When we reviewed the number of properties that we now have, because we have sold some properties that flowed through to a reduction in the amount that we had.
Okay.
Tenancy inducements sound flash, but all it means is that when we get a new tenant, we tart up the foyer and repair and make it look nice. So there's no financial inducements. It's just how we make sure the building looks attractive for the market.
Like any landowner would do.
Like any landowner would do.
Yeah, okay. The additional cost for wastewater master plan, the original budget for that was $79,000. So this is an extra $100,000 for that. So that's more than double.
I need a little bit of time to look at that because the project's bigger than that, so I just need to find out where you got the 79 million from. So
79,000.
79,000.
Oh, yeah, that's 1,000, isn't it?
79,000. So
Okay. And I just 2 other questions. Same page. Same for you, Chris. The additional water main requirements in Ruakura. I think that was around 800,000 for, I don't know, maybe year 4 or year 5 in the 10-year plan. So this is on top of that as well.
So once again, that's a program of work. So what that relates to is our proposed reservoir site in Ruakura, and we need to preload the site. So through the initial investigations, the geotechnical investigations, the site's very soft, So instead of just building a reservoir and in advance of building the reservoir, we need to preload the site. So that's the work that's required. So once again, it's a program of work. So that I can't remember the total cost of the reservoir across 4 years, but it's spread across 4 or 5 years.
Okay. It just seemed like a lot of money I didn't identify that as having the bucket was 1.2 million and we've only spent 700,000 and now...
Yeah, the bucket's bigger than that. It's a multi-year.
So the money
project.
is there, but you
Yep.
need to bring it forward. Okay. Last question, just on page 51, just on 157, the cost to complete the annual plan process. Originally, when we went out to consult, you said it was between 50 and 75,000. Maybe this is a question for Julie. So does that mean you came under budget and it only cost 25,000, or is that on top of?
No, we've spent 50 to this point, and the 25 is what's remaining.
So it says here the cost to complete the annual plan process at 25,000.
Yep, so from here on, there's another $25,000.
Oh, there's another 25,000. So if we've spent 50, there's another 25, so it'll be 75 to go out and consult.
To complete the whole process is, yeah. So there's another, and it's mostly staff time of that 25,000. So that's the process from here to actually complete the annual plan document and to do the writing and production, etc. of that.
Yeah. Can we have a breakdown of that when we come back to June, just of those costs to understand? We normally, it's getting up close to 100K, which is probably when we start getting into slightly material for stuff for decisions like this.
Sure.
Just so I can understand staff costs.
Absolutely.
Yeah, that'll be great. That's all. Thank you.
Councillor Gary.
Thanks, and I'm sorry, this is kind of repeating what Angela said, but I just didn't quite get it. The accounting, on page 49, we've got that operating statement position. So can you just walk me through what you've done there? So the surplus as at March was $808.58,580,000 positive.
That's correct. In the adjustments, so we reviewed our volume growth as we do,
yep.
And that moved from 1% to 1.3%. So that gave us $437,000. Yep. Additional revenue from rating. We reduced finance costs and depreciation through the reduction of the capital program. That totalled 950. There's currently a figure showing here of 350 that we were asking for in terms of support to complete the long-term plan, but as per the motion on the board, we've reduced that to $310,000. So the total changes flow through. So
okay,
just
and the reduction in depreciation is because there are some things we're not going to get done this year, which is
deferring some capital programs, so there's no depreciation to be charged.
So, okay, got that. Then you've then said, okay, those three things there, in black.
Yep.
Where do they impact? So they.
If you look at the balancing the books number,
yep.
That's showing $1 million and 35 surplus. Yep. We've reduced that number, taken into account the decision this morning around parking of $750.
Okay, so we were David.
Subtract 750.
Yeah. Okay. So Okay. So subtract 750, subtract 325,000, and add on
40.
The 40. Yeah, and that'll
bring that number to zero.
Bring that number to zero. Okay. So
correct.
It was going to. Okay. All right. Gotcha. And this is good that this has been brought to us. So and well done, Angela, for remembering the initial figures for these things. On page 50, the projects that have been deferred. So that will hopefully mean any carryovers will be reduced to zero or close to zero.
So in terms of this current financial year, as per the monitoring report, there's a number of projects that we're looking to defer into next year. But these ones relate to...
Oh, next year, sorry.
Yep.
Sorry, sorry, beg your pardon. That was the other ones on the bottom, the 2017-16. So those are things that are have they already been brought to our attention, those? Have those been brought to our attention?
The other changes?
Yeah.
Today. It's the first time we've
Okay, all right. And then we're saying these projects up the top there, they are this year's projects which are being thrown out to next year?
No, those are projects that were originally in the following financial year, so the 2017-18 year,
Yeah.
which have been removed and deferred into the 2018-19 year.
Oh, okay.
So on top of this revised $89 million CapEx program will be any deferred project from this year.
Okay.
That will go on top.
Now I got it. Thank you.
Councillor Paula?
Just a quick question along the lines that Angela was mentioning. So we're pretty much, the surplus we would have had has disappeared, but there's no, after we balance the books, but there's no deficit in the end. So, okay. So that, when I was asking questions about what wouldn't be done if we went down this route that of the previous conversation, Chris was here, and I asked what wouldn't be done, and was assured there really wouldn't have been. It was a surplus, and there wasn't earmarked necessarily. This, if we weren't paying for the projects that we've just agreed to, this would have been applied where this money, this surplus would have gone where?
That would have assisted us paying down debt.
It would have gone against debt. So we've actually funded the parking and review of the district plan from that.
Correct.
Thank you.
Councillor Robb?
Thanks, Chair. Look, I'm struggling to understand what we've got on page 49. As I read it, and I'm still not convinced the questions that have been asked really fit into the correct answer. As I read this, the operating statement position is for the remainder of this financial year, not for the 17-18 year. Well, why has it got surplus deficit as at June 2017?
That's just referring to the date when we brought this paper to council. So the first draft had these numbers in, but
so
they all relate to
this should really be headed up. Operating statement position estimated for 2018?
Could have been improved by having that, yes.
Well, it's not very clear there because, so how do we know that we've got a surplus deficit as at March 2017, which we're now assuming will be the position in March 18?
So we tracked through the what our long-term plan was, and then we came up with our adjusted balances based on the decisions council had previously made.
Yep.
And then we brought through in March a number of alterations to that, recommended changes that were approved, and now we're sitting at this position of saying here are the final changes.
So those are the dates that you've done those calculations rather than the dates that they actually relate to?
That's correct.
Okay, it just doesn't seem clear to me that we're being asked to vote on the under E on the 17-18 annual plan budget as final, and we haven't really got the annual plan budget in front of us to vote on. All we've got is a kind of a shortened summary which I assume has come from the long-term plan, but which has sort of got a simple number of, or a limited number of pluses and minuses to it, which are reaching out 9 months ahead of time and reflect what might happen between March 2018 to June 2018.
So Council approved the draft budget for the 17-18 draft budget. Council approved that draft budget in March of this year.
At the last meeting, okay.
Yep.
Okay.
And so what is reflected in here is any changes
now
subsequent to March.
Okay, now I understand.
That's all we're asking for.
It's probably not hugely clear here. Yeah, okay. Okay, so I'm okay with that now. And just a comment following on from Angela and Gary, could we in future reports have, where you've got 157, where you've got that 25,000 to complete, have a note to the effect that that's in addition to the 50 that's already been incurred? And I think if I go back to page right at the start, where we've in the past asked for the financial status, where again it's got 25,000, it should really have that the budget to complete the annual plan process is 75,000. So it's quite clear as to what the cost is. Otherwise we pick up a 25 here when 50's already been incurred, and we kind of lose the track in terms of what the total cost has been.
That's the expectation, Councillor Pascoe should have done as you're suggesting.
That's my understanding.
That's correct. You're correct.
Been past instruction. Yeah. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so we've got a mover and a seconder. We've got to move to debate. Just one question before we do on page 49, paragraph 144. Under the government's balancing the books measures, where would we be?
I couldn't answer that right now, but I can come back to you with it.
Thank you. Okay, so we're moving to debates. Councillor Paula.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. This is what it is, and I'm going to support the recommendation for the annual plan, because I see the most important body of work coming ahead of us in just a matter of 3 or 4 months when we start talking about it, which is the long-term plan. This last couple of months has been quite tricky for me, because we've made a number of decisions where we've put things in, and some decisions to not do things or defer things in a slightly random way. If you look at item on page 48, the linkage of the Western Rail Trail, which I think will be awesome for the CBD, that's out at the moment, but it might come back in the LTP. We've made 2 decisions today to put things in for good, robust debate and reasons, and nothing's always black and white. There's always the shade of grey. I do hope that this is the end to projects that add cost before the LTP, where we can see things in an integrated and holistic way, because it feels to me sometimes like we're conducting a death by 1,000 cuts with little additions and deferrals. And I really want to get stuck into the LTP in a transparent way, because there's so much in there and the community is really interested. So we've only got a couple of months now from June to August, September, when we begin the conversation. I really hope I don't find myself in the situation of sitting here committing further money or new projects between now and then. Thank you.
Okay, so we'll go to the vote. Yep, go Rob.
Look, I echo Paula's comments. We will have had, as we start the 17-18 year, 3 years of surplus after 9 years of deficit. So we have set ourselves on a much steadier road in terms of living within our means. And I'm a little bit concerned about the interest in increasing spending that has gone on since December. And whilst I think that there is a lot of merit in a number of those projects, we need, as we move into the 17-18 year, to be extremely careful that we have got a very, very tight budget, and we need to make sure that if additional spending is required, that it needs to be spending that's essential to maintain our assets, to ensure that we don't get caught unsurprised with anything, and to make sure that we do work to a balanced budget, whether it's a small surplus or a zero surplus for the 17-18 year. Thank you.
Councillor Mallett.
Thanks. I'm interested by Paula's comments. The changes that are coming about are generally through our decisions, as far as I can see. So to question staff, about those things, they can only update our books as we make a decision. So I just find it a bit strange that, was it February this year, all hell broke loose because there were ambushes and all sorts of carry-on happening, as quote unquote. And there was a lot of concern then that councillors weren't aware of the actual position, and our financial position was worse or better than it was, and people were changing figures around the place. We then got a really, really robust, I thought, summary of where we are. The CEO and David got together and presented to us what was going on. From then on, it became within our hands, And I haven't seen a change in behaviour around the governance body in terms of our spending priorities. We still seem to be unable to separate between the nice-to-haves and the must-haves, and we are running into a torrent of must-haves coming up in terms of HIFs and things like that. I just caution everyone that you know, the long summer's over and that there is a, what would you say now, Mark, you eloquent little bugger, you? There's a winter of discontent coming, eh? Yeah, that there is a lot of spending that we can control. There's a lot of spending we can't control. And for goodness sakes, if we don't put the brakes on when the, did someone get really upset about that? If we don't put the brakes on, yeah, no, hang on, I'm talking. Just hang on. If we don't put the brakes on when the you know, with the stuff that we can control, we're going to be in deep trouble. So we are the masters of our own destiny, and unfortunately, we're also the masters of 160,000 people's destinies in some extent. So we need to be careful what we do.
And actually laying this at the feet of the staff.
Stop, please. No, stop. What is your point of order?
He incorrectly asserted that I was laying this at the feet of staff, and I'm not. I'm taking governance responsibility for that spending.
Is it a point of order on incorrectness?
It's incorrect. I'm saying that we've made those decisions. I never suggested that this was staff's doing. It's a governance issue. You're right.
That's exactly what I said. That it's our responsibility. I didn't say it has anything to do with the staff. I said these guys gave us the
Gary,
information.
Please. Stop, Paula. Okay, you've made your point of order. Continue.
Oh, I'm done anyway, thanks.
Thank you. Councillor Siggy.
Andrew, just a quick one. I feel I have the same sentiments as Councillor Mallett and Councillor Paula, that we have been spending, although I just really don't like that either, because we have got a responsibility to our ratepayers, and sometimes because of being new and maybe not always privy to all the discussions that are happening maybe in other places, I'm not sure. It comes to this, and we haven't had the robust discussions. And yes, I heard about timing and all that, but somewhere along the line we have to have a chance to actually talk things out. And I just felt I haven't had that yet, really, in hardly any of the decisions. So I just, for the future, I would love to have more time and or more chances to discuss it more in depth than coming to something like that and then having to make a decision quickly and I'm wondering whether I've made the right decision today or not. So that's just, I need more robust discussion on that. That's my comment. Thank you.
Councillor Leo.
Unfortunately, I'm having a bit of a bad day here, Your Worship, because...
call me Mayor, if you have to call me anything, but Andrew's fine.
I am having a bad day here because I voted against two things which are in this budget. And if I vote for this budget, I'm not really being honest to myself. With the parking and with the regulatory effectiveness program. So unfortunately, I'm going to have to vote against this motion.
It's supposed to be about accuracy, isn't it? We're voting as to whether it's accuracy. You need to point that out.
Hey, he's within his rights.
I'm just digesting. Are you saying it's not accurate, or you? No, that's all right. Okay, okay. Thank you. Yep. Okay, Councillor Ange. Sorry.
I thought I'd missed something really good then. Look, it wasn't. This picture wasn't. Annual plan picture wasn't looking good when staff reported to us in March. With the balancing the books, which is our most conservative measure. It's not the government's one. It's our one. Of a deficit of, I think that's the $2,000. The CEO in a couple of months went back and did some further refinement and managed to increase that from a $2,000 deficit to a surplus of $1 million, and in 3 short hours we whipped out our chequebook and we spent it. We're not even in the 17-18 year. We don't know what we're going to be facing. Unexpected things happen. We know that because we have river slips, we have slips along pathways, and we have all sorts of other things. Hopefully nothing too great like that with massive amounts tagged onto them. But it does concern me that we're not even in the year yet and we're spending up large. Both of the projects that we've spent up large on today should have, in my opinion, been discussed at the long-term plan process and being put up and prioritised fairly with everything else that we want to do, including the massive bow wave of growth and the HIF fund and the responsibilities and massive financial pressure that that's going to put on the city. So I find myself in the same boat as Councillor Tooman in that I will have to not support this budget because of those reasons. Thank you.
Deputy Mayor Martin.
Thank you. Central government is a contrast. We're far more open in our process than central government, but I've got to say this, that would you believe that central government would ever wait 3 years for some 10-year long-term plan to do anything? Because every day, every week, you are in the governance of this city and this council, elected by the people of this city, and the people of this city expect you to do things and to respond to conditions as they arise. Of course, a very comprehensive discussion, consultation, debate, difficult decisions will, of course, come around the long-term plan in the next year. That is obvious, but the annual plan is still always a very, very important tool to effect appropriate measures, change and all of that. And obviously we all know this exercise that we've just gone through is something of a very low-key warm-up with respect to the real crunch decisions that we're actually going to be faced moving in to the next year. As, of course, one of New Zealand's fastest growing cities that has all of the challenges that growth is going to affect us. And I also want to take this opportunity to compliment the Mayor and staff and all of us, and I don't mean that in a self-congratulatory, but I want to say thank you to our staff for the work that has been done to date. And I think His Worship the Mayor did raise some issues earlier on around some of the financial pressures that are on us as a city, and I acknowledge, you know, the Revenue Task Force and all the other groups are going to be working to effect an outcome. Frankly, compared with what we're about to enter into, this has been something of cruise control.
And I'll just comment that these accounts are accurate. These accounts are done under a current financial strategy model. That model is not what central government says we should be reporting. They want us to report showing DCs out, which would mean we'd be millions and millions of dollars not balancing our books. As well as that, we're burning around about $4 million a year, increasing our debt by about $4 million a year. And the story hasn't changed from when we had our last briefing. And I believe there'll be another briefing coming to remind us of this. But in the meantime, we're collectively making decisions around this table of where we're going, not purely based on finances, but based on what we believe is the right thing to happen for this city. So our accountants make decisions based on money. Our staff, depending on what department they come from, recommend or steer us in the direction that they believe that area should go in. But our job as elected members is to consider the finances, is to consider the greater good for the community and what's the best thing for our ratepayers and what's the best thing for Hamilton. So we are coming into a time when we are going to have to consider what our current financial strategy is going to be going forward and what the model is of how we report. How we've reported in the past was fine 6 years ago when we were in the middle of the GFC and there was no development going on and there was very little development levies coming in. But that's dramatically changed now, and leading up to the 10-year plan, that decision on what model we use to report will be considered around this table and as to how we report going forward. So I'm voting and supporting this report because it is accurate. It is how it is today, and that is because of decisions, not that staff have made, they're decisions that have been made by us around this table. So we need to take responsibility for the position we're in and vote to the accuracy of these accounts. Thank you. So we'll go to the vote.
The motion is carried 8-4-3 against.
Okay. Just stay there, Sean, please. So we're now moving to recommendation 3, which is should be the bottom recommendation on your sheet. We'll just get that back on the board. Sorry, 4, is that right? It's not 4, it's 3, isn't it? Yeah. Yeah, we are 4, yeah. So, do we have any questions on this? No, hang on.
Yeah, we're doing 3. Me and Andrew. This one.
We've just voted on that one. Yeah, so it's motion 4 now. Can we just have, can you read that out? Can you read that out, please, Becca?
That council notes the final 2017-18 annual plan document will be prepared for approval at the council meeting on 29 June 2017.
Okay, any questions? So that's been moved by Jeff and seconded by Mark.
Just one
yes.
quick. This, I think, with all due respect, Andrew, was what you were referring to now. Yes, absolutely. This is the annual plan document that will be prepared. This is not whether you agree with the thing or not. This is the accurate document. This will go out. So this one, with all due respect, you can't vote against.
Well, the last one, if you read what was there, anyway, we won't debate that.
But I'm talking about what's on the screen. Is that right? Yeah. This is just simply, it is what it is, and it has to go out. Yeah.
Any other questions? Okay, any debate? Okay, I'll put that to the vote. All those for? Any against? Carried unanimously. Thank you. Yay. Okay, so we're now moving to item 10. Blair, please. Page 75.
Thank you, Your Worship. I think the report is relatively...
Call me the Mayor or Andrew, please.
Mayor Andrew. I did hear the debate earlier. Look, I think I'll take the report as read. This is a variation to the contract for the new Civil Defence Centre. So happy to take any questions on the content of the report.
Councillor Dave.
Yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think, was there not an increase in operating costs came forward recently for this as well?
So we brought the contract to council back in August last year, so that was...
not just, I mean for the actual operation of our share of the... Isn't this the second one?
This is a second report relating to the same matter. So in August last year you approved the new contract with the regional council, which included this facility, and that was an increase in cost.
It was.
Yes, it was. And that had included the cost of the facility. Unfortunately, through the final design process and the space required, the costs have increased, and so that's what we're seeing.
So who was responsible for the working out those costs? Was it the guy who came in with his team to speak for about, you know, each of them told us what they had for breakfast each day last meeting?
What colour shirts they wore?
Look, it's fair to say it's a complicated building that's being built, so the regional council are doing the best they can with information, but they were also receiving new information from the builders as part of the process, so the fit out has been more complicated. So it's not easy to say where it's arisen. It's arisen through a combination of as the building project has progressed, costs have come out through that process. The specification for the fit out has had to change as a result of, as I understand more about the building. The space that we have required through the staff has increased. So a combination of factors.
But don't you let a contract for a sum and have contingencies built into that? And the design, presumably when the contract's let out, the design is already prepared in advance?
The answer, yes. Look, this is not an ideal situation. I would have only wanted to come to council once. At the time we let the contract with the Civil Defence Group, the building was still very much in its early stages of being finalised in terms of design. The design has moved on, they're now building it. Unfortunately, the contingencies and estimates that were put in place were insufficient. And so
you said the design had moved on, you just said that then.
The design is evolving, so the floor plate plans...
So's our budget evolving.
I'm not asking for any money in the 17-18 year, so... But I agree, Councillor, it's not a situation that I want to be in. I certainly put the Regional Council under extreme pressure, but this is the required increase.
So in terms of putting the Regional Council under pressure, if we voted this down, they would be responsible for paying the extra?
No, I think we would then have a situation where the contract we entered into with them would be insufficient to fund the portion of space that we require, so we'd either receive less space.
But didn't the contract we entered into them not only talk about the space we need and how many staff we'd have there, but also the dollar amount we'd be giving them?
Yes, it did, but the space has increased and the fit-out costs, so that contract was predicated on some assumptions which were specified within tables of the contract around fit-out costs and estimates around that, the space. But they have changed.
Were we asked to agree to the extra fit-out costs?
We made a decision based on the best information at the time.
Which was provided by the Regional Council?
Correct. But Councillor, I guess this is a partnership approach, and working in collaboration with them, I'm not looking to lay the blame on the Regional Council. It's an evolving, complicated process with the building. The simple matter of the fact is that the costs that they had estimated through the best efforts that they had made with the builder were insufficient. That's what we now have in front of us today.
So is there a table showing everyone's increased costs? Because we're only seeing our increased costs. I want to see that pro rata there was, so they were meeting the same extra costs. Waikato District are involved, or
so it's just between ourselves and Waikato Regional, because Waikato District don't have a spot within the building. But yes, they are wearing considerably greater share of the cost increases because they have more staff and more of the building space. So there is a very, very transparent allocation within behind the numbers you have in front of you today, which allocate those costs proportionally.
Have they already agreed to the extra costs as the lead contract holder?
Yes, they have.
So we're being told you pay up, full stop. They're not consulting with us before they agree with
no,
the cost overrun.
They have consulted with us, so sorry, I should clarify. They have sought my direction, and I have said I'll bring the report here today. I've negotiated with them. So, of course, if Council declines today, then we will have a contractual issue with the Regional Council.
And you said to them, I'll take it to Council, but I can't guarantee they'll agree with it, I'm sure, didn't you?
I said I will take it to Council with a recommendation to support it.
Okay. Which they would know is no guarantee.
Correct.
Yeah.
I think, to be clear, councillors, I don't wish to bring these matters asking for more money. It's not the great outcome. No. But as I say, this is a challenging building with some very specific requirements. They have led to both increased space required and increased cost.
It's a brand new building, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
And the design specs that they knew, I mean, in terms of geotech requirements were known for that area before we started, like the ground conditions, yes. The earthquake-proof requirements haven't changed since the design was done?
No, it's more around the fit-out requirements for the space that's needed for the purposes of the civil defence area, in terms of that and the specifics around what's needed and how the building is configured in terms of how the staff work and the space required to accommodate the staff.
But wasn't all that known beforehand? I mean, having been on the old CDM committee, when they first started talking about this building, it seemed like they knew what they were talking about then.
I think they made their best endeavours, but those best endeavours were the wrong numbers.
Do they always take all of their staff to meetings when they introduce them and take up huge amounts of time?
That will not be happening.
I was wondering whether that's part of the cost overrun.
You will get the extreme edited version next time.
Thank you. We won't get 41-page reports to GNI on future... Oh, sorry. Waikato District, you said, are not involved, but I thought they were part of the group.
They are part of the group, and they certainly have a contractual arrangement with the group emergency management office, but they don't have a physical presence in that building. So they are not having any staff members located from that facility, nor are they purchasing a city safe space, nor are they purchasing an emergency operations centre, which this contract is.
I can understand city safe, that's ours alone,
yep.
But one of the things that you described to us all the way along, if there was a emergency, let's say at Raglan,
yes,
in Waikato District there, that required some of the expertise that was housed in the new building over here, those people from our council or the regional council would be going out to help them.
Yes,
and the part of the overheads though for those people from the other two councils is the running and building of this thing over here.
So the regional council funds the group emergency management office, so that's entirely funded by them, which includes that support you talk about to all councils. Okay. Waikato District Council purchase one staff member who is located at Waikato District Council offices, but is managed by the team. They don't purchase any space within that building. If an event happens, they don't have any space set aside to manage the Waikato District event from there. They have their own location at Ngarawahia. So that's the difference. So they pay a service fee to the group office for the staff member and the management of that staff member and the advice, but they don't pay anything towards that building.
Okay. So they got one dedicated staff member. How many have we got?
3.5 for a period of 2 years, and then it drops to 2.5.
That's right.
And the reason for that 3.5 was to get Hamilton up to a certain level of performance, and that was assessed at needing 2 years, and then a more business as usual position of civil defence would be the 2.5 staff.
Okay, thanks.
Just a question, what percentage of income does regional council get from Hamilton City Council?
From Hamilton City residents.
From what? So what?
In terms
regional council feeds off our residents. What percentage of their income comes, of the pie, comes from our ratepayers?
Look, I don't know, Andrew. Sorry, we don't have that information.
Because in effect, this is $300,000, and if 50% of their income comes from us, it's actually $450,000 directly from our residents, isn't it? So it's actually compounded further than the 300,000. The effect on our residents.
Look, I don't have the numbers that look at what the...
Do you follow what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, but look, I don't have those numbers to hand. Bearing in mind their cost share is a portion across the entire region, not just Hamilton City. So I mean, whatever their share of the cost increase is, I don't have that with me, is then split on a formula right across the entire region. I don't have those numbers, but I know that the
from memory, it's 45%.
Yeah, but I think the amount of the rate, the regional council rate, specifically used to fund the emergency management portion, is a relatively very small part of their overall rate take. But I don't have those figures right now. But I know it's not a significant part of their rates.
Well, what I'm asking is if we pay if our residents are paying 300,000 here, and regional council, half their money comes from our residents as well.
Oh, I'm not suggesting half their rates comes from Hamilton.
Well, I think it's 45%.
I don't have those numbers.
Okay.
I would suggest it's...
I'm just suggesting that it's a lot. The cost to our residents is a lot more than 300,000.
Sure. Yes. I mean, there will be a corresponding amount through the regional council rate, which would also apply to Hamilton. I would certainly wouldn't suggest it's as high as the percentage you were talking about.
Gary.
Thank you. Thanks, Blair. Hey, how many volleyball courts can you fit on there?
I reckon about 3.
Dave would know.
I think Dave might be able to answer that question.
Well, the reason I bring that up is this isn't the first time we've had a balls up in a, and I don't know who's caused this or why this has happened. So you know, a lot of what Dave was is we are poor, really poor at, it seems to me, at managing these partnership type development things. And I remember trying to get a review of the process we went through with the Rototuna indoor stadium, and that was shot down and things like that. But you know, in the space of less than 6 months, and I'm looking at you because you're the guy sitting there, but you know, as a governance group, we need to just wake our own ideas up and put some form of project management or something like that, because this should be easy stuff. Honestly, this is a brand new building, so there's, you know, it's not like they were trying to. Hang on. What?
Just remember, when the Western Rail Trail blew out, that was our staff's issue. This is actually a third-party issue.
Yeah, that's my point. I mean, that actually doesn't make any difference.
It's not Blair's. Yeah, it's a third party to Blair.
Yeah, like I'm saying, but we need some form of, we need some sort of framework or infrastructure or some sort of process whereby we project manage these things.
What I'm saying is don't beat Blair up because it's
I'm not beating Blair up.
It's a third party, okay?
Yeah, I got that. So what we need, and shame on us, because we let it ride. I mean, dear old Jeff even called it a knee-jerk reaction, that we shouldn't be doing it. But we do need to, and like I said, you've got, it was a virgin site, so there's nothing, you know, it's a well-established site, you've got a very reputable construction outfit. We shouldn't be making these mistakes. We just should not be making these mistakes. I mean, if we were a private contractor, we'd have tipped over on this one, or this and the Rototuna thing. So I don't know what we do, but I tried to get some sort of investigation into why we screwed up on the Rototuna thing, and it's just happened again now, and I'm, you know, it's sad, but I told you so, and I don't like saying that, but you know, we've learnt nothing, and I spent 3 years listening to general managers saying we've got some learnings out of this, we've got some learnings out of this. It was all gobbledygook. We haven't got any better at it at all, and it's. So, you know, my point is, yep, we're not, you know, maybe we're not responsible, but we should be able to manage these things a lot better than that.
I agree.
And it just, disappointing.
Thank
you. There you go, Richard.
Okay.
Hello, Gary.
We'll go to the votes. All those for... Oh, sorry.
I did have another question. Thanks. And that is, what was the cost increase that we were told of in September 2016 when it came to August?
It was about 125,000.
So it's a total cost increase of 425.
Oh, sorry, no, so the 125 was per annum.
Times 6 3/4 years?
No, because that was only in the certain years. It averaged out, so sorry, I don't have those full numbers in front of me. It was, I think the average contract cost was $415,000 under the contract approved last year. We had a budget of about $280,000 per annum, so it was 125,000
per year.
Per year
for average. For 6 3/4 years.
Albeit the first year was a smaller amount, so 6 years.
That's about 2 million extra.
No,
total.
No, 700,000. 6 years, 125,000 a year.
Oh, okay. Yeah, look at that. All right. So it's So it's not. Yes, the background's not in here fully. Yeah.
I think in absolute terms, Councillor McPherson, I'm seeking a $300,000 increase in the approved contract sum. The good news is that we're tracking $95,000 under budget for the current year. So in effect, we're already doing better than I'd hoped for the current year. That part of that is to do with the delay in the building being built. Part of that is to do with the staff saving costs. So this is a worst case scenario, but I'm bringing a worst case approved contract scenario to the table. For all the reasons you've identified in terms of making sure that we are not coming back in front of this council again asking for anything changed.
Have we pushed back against the regional council and said no, that's too much? We're only, I only want to recommend, 200,000 or half of the amount.
I'm recommending to you the result of my discussions with the regional council.
So what did they originally ask for? then? If you're recommending to us the final outcome, what do they want to start with?
Look, I don't have that information, but I can assure you that I have not, I've negotiated this firmly and closely. So this is,
as the chief negotiator, you must remember roughly what the original was. I think the chief executive is wanting to get in on the act here.
No, sorry, I was still catching up with the Mayor's questions from earlier, trying to validate those, so sorry, I was trying to catch up.
Okay, so surely you've got an idea about how much you screwed them down by?
Look, no, I don't have that number, Dave, but it was certainly higher than the $300,000 increase. But it's there's a number of variables that go into making this number. So yeah, no, like I'd be guessing. But it's certainly come down.
Councillor Ange.
Thank you, Andrew. Just to clarify then, in the report you say that the annual increase is going to be funded from existing budgets in 17-18.
Yes.
And I guess this is something I was perhaps alluding to before. So we don't have any money in the 17-18 budget, but we can fund it from existing budgets. So how do we keep doing this? How do we keep...
Well, we have an existing budget for city safe and civil defence emergency management built into the 17-18 budget, which has some other aspects to it, and we will make savings within those budgets to accommodate the small change in the 17-18 year.
So I don't mean this to sound how it's going to sound, but do we pad our budgets that much to be able to manoeuvre all? And I know sometimes we have to, absolutely, but to manoeuvre things and move things around because the agreed annual plan is whatever is in those projects and that work you have to deliver, and you've said you're going to deliver. So how can we keep stretching the elastic band when it's got walls on each side?
Two comments, Angela. One is this is an approved contract sum. The actual contracted amount is less than this, so there is contingency built into this amount. So, and then secondly, there are always choices within any budget where you can make some choices. And Kelvin and I have looked through his budgets and determined that there are opportunities to still deliver the level of service whilst meeting this cost within the budget.
So that won't mean that city safe patrol hours get chopped or litter gets stopped being, it's not that budget, but...
No.
So, yeah, I guess that question is still sitting in the back of my head then. How much do we actually pad our budgets to be able to be nimble like this?
We're not very nimble at all. So Blair's making it sound quite easy that him and Calvin sat round and were able to... Found this. 300,000. This requires significant level of interrogation to determine this amount. We are tight right across council.
Yeah, and I certainly don't intend to imply that we found it.
No, I take that on face value. Yeah.
We're trying to find the money machine that was referred to earlier by Councillor O'Leary to hope that will help us out.
I like that, room. And so the small annual increase to be reflected in the long-term plan is that what's that amount?
So that's the difference between the average of 415,000 and the average of 460.
Okay.
That's an average difference, Councillor, so that won't be that amount each year. And that is the actual amount is less than that because, again, there's a contingency built into that contract sum.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Gary.
Just a question to Richard. How do we build some sort of expertise or some sort of template or a framework or something so that we don't have these things happening? And I know you can't stop everything, but there's this to me strikes me as being a reasonably simple project. I might be wrong. Yeah, sure, it's a Category 4 building, all that sort of stuff, but Foster's would have built, knows exactly how to build those things, and it sounds to me it may have been that some party didn't actually specify what they want accurately, and those are the sort of questions Dave was asking. But it upsets me and annoys me that we should be looking at, we should be safe to know that there's a project management methodology or something that prevents these things happening. And it's not just like it happened once a term. It happens more often than it should.
Yep, so you're right, full stop in terms of there should be something. In terms of, to draw the parallels between, so I have looked at the road return into a rec centre and so forth. The scenario there was under pace in terms of basically we came to council because the pressure was being placed on us to approve an amount to get something done. And at that stage we approved an amount without any details, so it's slightly different to the scenario. So that was the big drawback then. It came through here with very little depth of scope and council, because we tried to get advantage of the ministry's funding opportunity, basically approved an amount, and then from that point forward we just didn't have enough information. This one here I haven't yet to get into the detail behind, and I'm not going to use the L word, but I am going to sit down with Blair and just look about what we can do and what we can do to make it a procedural change, because that's what you're asking for.
Yeah, just
procedural change.
Because that's all we can do. All we can do is ask if there's a system of internal controls and project management that mitigates or, you can't eliminate, but minimises these sorts of things that we do learn from previous mistakes.
And I'm not going to say whether this is a mistake or not, because I haven't got into it to understand.
Yeah, neither do we. We don't know what's caused it.
Absolutely. But the key challenge with any of these things is the extent to which we scope and understand the details of the scope. And then the extent to which is what Councillor McPherson's questions were implying, that the chief negotiator holds account based on those criteria when we're negotiating any changes, and to what extent we just say no, that's actually not what we originally signed up for. And one of the comments Blair was trying to weave into this was, this is a partnership we're trying to do to and fro with the regional council to get the best outcomes. So I need to sit down with Blair and actually understand the details a lot closer before I can respond specifically to what the process changes will be, but Blair and I will work on that.
And can I just add one comment? It doesn't answer, partially answers Dave's earlier question. If I had brought to you the raw change, we'll be talking a much bigger number. So many of the things that you were referring to there, Gary, have happened behind the scenes to drive this number down to a number we have in front of us today. Okay. So I think it's through the partnership aspect of this, we wanted to go forward, but we have certainly drilled this down pretty hard to get it back to a number. And bearing in mind, we're not involved in the build of the building. It's we're a subtenant of the tenant being the regional council who are working with the builder. So we're sort of one step removed. So so in that
so my challenge here is what I'm going to be talking to Blair about is if we were aware of these costs when we originally went into this, would we still make the decision to proceed? And that's really the challenge that I think you and Councillor McPherson are alluding to. If you had all this information available to us from day one, would you still have proceeded with the decision to actually enter into a contract?
That is one aspect, but then once we've gone ahead with that, you ring fence that, and there's $300,000 that could have been used somewhere else. It could go back to ratepayers or it could go to another project. So it's not only that, there's the things we didn't do with $300,000 that we could have done.
But it's a case in all cases, whether it's that argument or the argument I put forward, eyes wide open is really what you're saying. Eyes wide open. And I'm not arguing with that. No.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Siggy.
Thank you so much. Well, it does worry me that it could have been much bigger, and and you had to work really hard to get it down to this number. But the other thing I want to ask is, what happens in the real world out there when a project overruns? Some of you might have done some projects. What happens?
One or other party bites the bullet and has to pay some more, or just as we said, then you have to de-scope it down. You have to either they can pay for it, and one of the parties will negotiate, and someone gives and takes, or you have to, I think they call it value manage it down, don't they?
This is not an uncommon process.
It doesn't get a roof.
And it happens right across all areas. We depending on the nature of the contract we enter into, it depends on who wears that risk. And if the cost is basically measure and quote, then we wear the risk because basically we scope it up. But if it's a fixed price contract, then the builder wears that risk and tries to deliver it for it. But ultimately, as Councillor Mallett suggests, there is always a need for really robust scoping, and the goal is to bring it in within that scope for that price. And the role is that the contingency that we build into these things reflect the risk that we haven't identified all contributing factors that could make it go off track is effectively used to manage the any variation as a consequence. So in this case, it sounds like there's been a rescoping along the way that I want to get my head around as well outside this meeting, just to understand that.
Okay, so it's not just because we're a council and we've got unlimited money?
No, in fact, I think there's a growing appreciation from the community that we have limited money, which is...
Well, we've got a tap though, and they're out there. sitting out there.
Yeah, but there's also 13 councillors around this table that actually push hard back to ensure we get value for money from the community as well. So there is good pressure.
So is there a contract in place that basically says they spend, we pay?
No, there's a contract in place with an approved contract sum of $2.8 million. So that is the contract that we've entered into, and I'm seeking a variation to increase that by $300,000. Now, if council does not approve that today, then we will have a situation whereby there's going to be increased costs incurred by the regional council as head tenant, head lessee, and we will, if we're not prepared to meet our equitable share of that, then we will have to either have a smaller area of the building, which would then have significant functional implications in terms of our location there, or there'll be a contractual dispute.
Hang on, point of order. We've got in the agreement between us and them, the area of the building is specified, is it not?
But there are also assumptions around the costs that drive the contract, and so those specified costs are part of those that have also changed.
But if we're not responsible for those cost increases, can't we get them to stick to the original contract?
Well, I think this comes to the heart of this is a partnership that we've entered into here with the Regional Council. So it very much is a partnership approach that we're taking to the civil defence.
It's a partnership approach to the paying, but who made the decision to change the scope, for instance? Did we?
I think I come back to there are three drivers to the changes here. One is insufficient allocation to certain cost categories in the budget. Second of those is the changed area requirement in terms of how the floor space is configured. And the third of those is through the fit out process. Some things have just been understated or completely missed.
But the numbers of staff that we have going in there, and the numbers of staff that the Regional Council have going in there, they were known before the contract was let, were they not?
That's correct, but it's the floor space area required and the allocation of the floor space within the floor plate, which has changed in terms of as they have got into the detailed work and looked at how much space is needed to operate the centre in a manner that's appropriate, and I guess the portion that relates to our staff.
Surely that sort of work was done before they did the final design?
Absolutely, but as they have progressed further through the process and looked at it even more closely, they have determined they needed to change it.
Excuse me, Blair, what's the urgency behind this? Because there's a lot of questions getting asked, and I don't necessarily know whether or not we're satisfying all the questions from councillors.
It's the build is continuing, and it's the fact that Regional Council have a contractual situation in terms of the build. So it's the time frames required from our commitment to their commitments with Foster's, the builder.
Okay.
So it is true they're spending. Regional Council is spending, and they're just giving us the bill on cost overruns, a percentage of it. So it's out of our control. They spend, we pay.
If you say no today, then there'll have to be a stop in spending and a contractual discussion around what this means. But they are spending, as the building is being built, the fit out is occurring although the fit out stage hasn't started, but they are very much in the final stages of preparing for the fit out stage. So me, Andrew, I brought this to the council as soon as I can, but very conscious of the time frame that the Regional Council and the builders are working to.
Do we have a finance meeting we could kick this to?
I was about to ask the when's the next finance?
It's early July.
Yeah, I just saw the headline come up.
So the next finance meeting is on the 4th of July, Independence.
So can you go back and go away from your gold-plated handles now and go to stainless steel and go away from carpet and do a polished floor? You know, that's what would happen in the real world.
So
because it appears to me that somebody else is spending our money. And they've got into budget on the fit out.
If I've given the impression that there is gold-platedness here or anything, then that is not the case. I have already put the regional council through that process. My starting position, Mayor Andrew, was no variation. I'm not even coming to council. So I've come to this point knowing that these sort of questions were going to be placed on this item. So I haven't brought this through to you lightly. I guess my recommendation, this is the variation required to achieve the facility needed to deliver civil defence services and city safe services as expected.
I know I'm sounding like a broken record, but is our staff approving our part of the fit out, or is somebody else's staff spending our money?
Our staff are approving the area that we require and in conjunction with regional council staff understanding the fit out, but the fit out is to a functional level but nothing more. So we're not involved in the detailed meetings with the builders, but we are certainly closely working with them in terms of what's required to enable our area to be fit for purpose.
Well, we've got the staff recommendation, so we'll get that up on the board. Yep. Have we got a mover and a seconder? Okay, so we haven't got a mover and a seconder, so we'll keep going with the questions until we can find one. So we've.
This is we're required to provide this service, so it's not a service we can't provide, eh?
That's correct.
Yeah, okay. That's all I want to know. Sorry, thank you.
So we have got a mover at this stage. So think about anyone else who wants to go up as a seconder. So we'll keep going. Councillor Angela.
So I'm on page 77 reading what the money is for, and there is nothing, and it does sometimes feel like, people, council have got deep pockets, so we don't push back. But I wouldn't want to push back on a facility like this. I want it to be excellent, but you're assuring us, although you're saying we don't have access to builders, we haven't gone in there and actually really seen. So I'm then taking it on face value that this isn't anything other than what this says, which is service costs such as cleaning and electricity, which could not be finalised till now, and that's come about from the increased floor space. There's nothing critical to the success of this being the first of its type in New Zealand.
I think simply put, the amounts that were identified and agreed to in the contract that you saw last year were wrong for the reasons that you've just mentioned there, and we've had to renegotiate those amounts to this figure here. Now, Angela, I can assure you the Regional Council CFO is been across this with a fine-tooth comb. He is not accepting any changes lightly. They're having to go through the same process internally. At the end of the day, the estimates that were used at the time for the contract were insufficient.
And so, sorry, I think someone did ask this question, but if we said no, you would just have to go back to the drawing board with them, and they would either have to cough up the money or cut something out of the finishing the build, wouldn't they?
Correct. Correct. And I think, obviously the entire contract amount includes staff costs and management, all sorts of things. So the variations relating to the building costs relating to both civil defence and city safe.
I wonder, I don't mean this, I keep saying this today, I don't mean this to be a mischievous question, but honestly, do people, we conduct this in open and that's fine, I don't have a problem with that, but do you think that there is a culture out there of, well, it's council, we do have deep pockets, let's
try that first?
I suggest that was a prevailing culture that existed in the community years ago, right? I think in Hamilton City there's probably the opposite view now when we start dealing with some of our contractors. We've been very, very hard at managing our tenders. We do a lot of work, and not in this case, but particularly in some of the larger areas where we get QSs and so forth to size up jobs, so we actually know what they are when the tenders come in. We have a very robust and well recognised procurement process to ensure that we get best quality and price. So I would suggest that doesn't exist as much anymore. You can't say it doesn't exist. There's probably a few people that would love to get hold of council because it is a guaranteed income for a while, but people know that we are professional in the way we manage our contracts. These third-party ones, when it's not us directly involved in the negotiation with the contract, we can't talk to the skills and expertise of the people that are, but we do our best to manage them the way we can through the contract.
And okay, so thank you for that. So, and did I hear you say earlier that you were sort of going to be, or you looked into the Rotorua Rec Centre issue, and that are you going to look into, I guess following on from Councillor Mallett's concerns and Councillor McPherson's, is it something that you can do to then report back to us your findings of taking, say, 4 or 5 examples like this, recent examples, and you know, investigating what's happened and how we can do that better and how we can project manage better, and coming back to us with your recommendations? Is that something that you can do?
I'm going to do it regardless.
You're going to do it regardless?
Every single one of them is unique. That's the issue. And whilst Councillor Mallett's right, at a high level they look the same. There are different movers and movements within each of them, and probably the Rotorua Rec Centre one related to the speed by which we progressed with it. I can't talk to the exact drivers of why we ended up today where we are, apart from what Blair's just informed us of now. It's different drivers, and one of the I'm about to use the L word. One of the things that we've
what's the L word?
Learnings.
Learnings.
Lunatic, yes. One of the observations, and we've already brought on board from a Rotorua Rec Centre point of view, is we did a disservice to the council by allowing ourselves to be rushed in terms of bringing forward a number and just saying we can do it for $4 million when we hadn't done a full scoping. And so that's where we fell down there. We should have actually taken the time to go off to do the QS, said, hey, look, if we can't do it right, we're not going to do it at all. And that's the sort of attitude we should have had. And we might have missed the opportunity, but then we ended up with the grief we did end up with, so we've got to balance out what's the greater risk. On this one, I need to get my head around it a little bit more with discussing with Blair, but I trust in the work that Blair's done. I believe that the deal we've got in front of us is probably the best deal, and someone's smarting as a consequence, and it's not us as a consequence. This represents a $50,000 increase per annum over 6 years, roughly.
Correct.
Roughly. It reflects probably the extent of a value for money proposition to a reasonable standard and not gold plated. So I would encourage council to at least consider moving forward and give me the opportunity to take the learnings from it to make sure that we tighten up. And maybe we end up tightening it up by putting more effort into our scoping, but I already think that we do a lot of robust scoping in the first place, but yeah.
Councillor Dove.
Yeah, thanks. It's another figure, another way to look at it is it's an 11% increase this time, and something similar 9 months ago.
9 months ago?
When we had, there was an increase.
Oh, in terms of for the original cut of the civil defence, yep.
Yep. Blair, the 460,000 per year annualised, the 3.1 million contract, or to be more precise, $459,259.26, is not at all for staffing, is it?
No.
It's only for rental, for building space that we're using, and the equipment that goes in that we will be using, communications equipment and IT and so forth.
Sorry, you're talking about the
3.1 million contract.
That includes staff, and includes management, includes overheads, it includes occupants.
It includes our staff.
Includes those staff, the 3.5 staff. Yes, so it includes the 3.5 staff. It includes the management of those staff by the group office. It includes the overheads associated with those staff. It also includes all the floor space for the civil defence and the city safe areas, And
does it include the staff of the City Safe?
No.
No. Okay, so just to clarify what it includes. What are we currently spending, let's say in the financial year we're sitting in now, on those same 2.5 staff in the management that you provide? So and the rental and, you know, apples for apples comparison, what's the annualised cost of that?
So the current year, bearing in mind the contract started in October, so from October last year.
Oh, well, okay, yeah, the last time we had a full year when we were doing it ourselves, because what I'm trying to home in on, and it follows the discussion we had at the CDM committee a couple of years ago, is this going to be cost effective for council?
So it was approximately $280,000 was the amount that we were spending on the staff that we had prior to this arrangement in place.
Yeah, on everything, the whole package, yes. Same package as we've got now.
Yes, that's right.
So 280 up to 460 a year.
Yeah. And bearing in mind that under this contract we have an additional staff member, we also have a world-class emergency operations facility as part of it.
I think that's where the gold-plated thinking came in, when world-class, one way that can be equated to gold-plating.
When I say world-class, I'm talking it's a building built to the levels to withstand a earthquake and operate post an earthquake. So that's the latest standings in terms of the building for an emergency operations centre, and also the benefits of the co-location of our staff in with the group office staff for the benefits of that all that brings. So
we were sold the original idea, were we not? There was going to be a premium on getting the world-class facility and the extra staff member. There would be a premium.
That's right.
But that premium was only a few tens of thousands per year at that time.
That premium was the difference between the 280 and the 415,000. So that was the.
But earlier figures than that, when it first came up to the CDM committee, weren't that high?
No, that was the amount that was reported to council in August last year.
Yeah. But before that, when it was first being mooted, was lower than that, wasn't it?
Yes, but it was very much a genesis of an idea at the time, so it was,
yeah. Okay. So I'd like to speak to the resolution when we get there.
Who is the contractor?
Regional Council, because this is a contract between ourselves and Regional Council. Regional Council are working through Foster's, who are the builders of the building. But we are not a party to that.
The structural changes that have affected this, whose fault was that there was structural changes?
So that's between things that Foster's have identified with the Regional Council in terms of things such as air conditioning systems and other structural elements. When I say structural, maybe the wrong term, core building elements relating to the space.
So that's not our fault. So the second bullet point is increased floor space. Who asked for that?
Again, that's a discussion between our staff and Regional Council staff in terms of how the entire floor plate is going to work and how functionally it works. So that has been a discussion and agreement between our staff and their staff.
So we've agreed to more floor space?
We've
needing more floor space?
We've identified that we need more floor space to make it work, yes.
Okay. So I'll second this motion after Leo's moved. I'll second. So we're now moving to debate. If there's no further questions, and there's not. Okay, Dave. No, debate.
Okay, thanks. I'm actually not going to support the resolution this time, and I've supported both at the CDM committee that we used to have on council and the first time around last year, supported the extra, though getting more reluctant each time I did do so, because it seemed to me the central financial problem for this council is we were paying more to get the regional service, and I would have thought, just putting my ordinary Kiwi hat on, that if you combine resources, when the split for each would inherently you'd think would be a bit less, you'd have some cost effectiveness, and it was all working the opposite way. And each time it's come back to us, it's been more. And while I appreciate the concept of working together regionally, and we've been trying to do that probably for about 15 years in this area, that word regional seems to equate to more money next time it comes back to you, and I've got to worry that It's not the end of it. And I also don't think we've sent the right message if we just agree to what's being requested. So I'm reluctantly not going to vote for it this time. I wouldn't, if it came back and it was pared down with some more justifications. You know, Blair's done a great job of advocating for it here, but I'm just not convinced that it's the end of the story or that it's the right way to go.
Councillor Gary.
I will surprisingly support this for...
Gary always supports spending more.
Yes, I'll be consistent. This is a must-have, not a like-to-have. We're required by legislation and also by what I would consider to be an appropriate definition of a core service. This is one of the things that we should be in. It is particularly unfortunate and possibly foreseeable that this has happened, and I'll be a bit careful how I use my words. We have been a little bit cavalier in our acceptance of spending more money when I think there's been some degree of project management failure. I don't know whether it's within this organisation or the partnership or where it is. So I don't know where the fault lies. And fault's a pretty strong word, but I think fault is one of the words we need to start being comfortable saying that someone's got this wrong. And it just saddens me that we didn't learn our lessons from the road attorney thing. Having said that, short of trying to negotiate, nickel and diming each other, which I think is the only other alternative, unless there is some valid scope reduction we can do, I would consider that this is what we've got. We're going to have. I can't see any alternative than for us to say yes, but it's with a heavy heart that I have to do it.
Yeah, and
that's a heavy heart.
It just appears to me that Dave's been supportive of this all the way through, and now he's reluctantly saying, he's had enough. And even though he's supportive of the overall project, and I think that message needs to get back through. And I think really the actual process of this whole tender and this report is pretty weak when it comes to what is the actual agreement, what is a tender, and what rights do we have as regional council in control, and they're spending and we're paying. And I don't seem to be able to get any concrete strong direction on what the structure is and how it works, but either way, we've got to have the centre. I guess we are normally in control, and this time we're not. So I'll be supporting it, but reluctantly, as the last two speakers have been reluctantly laying their positions out as well. Okay, we'll go to the vote. We'll go to the board to vote.
The motion is carried 8-4, 3 against.
It's good to mix it up every now and again, isn't it?
Are you staying here? Okay, so now go to page 78, item whatever, and we'll get Leanne to introduce the paper. Yeah. Seconded by Rob.
Nothing to add other than that this is the last of a sequence of these that you've seen coming forward to the committees.
Any questions, Dave?
It's really good we're getting these, but the gaps in there, like I just noticed the Tainui HCC joint management agreements, are they going to be filled in and sent to us? Presumably we are going to get a report sometime, you just don't know exactly when at this point?
That's correct.
And we'll get them sent a copy, or we don't need to come to a meeting, I wouldn't think, after this time?
Sorry, you mean in terms of the
timetable? So if someone
Yes.
wants to raise the agreement, they know when it's going to come up eventually. Yeah.
Yeah. So as I think I've mentioned, other ones work in progress, and our intention is to populate so that you understand that they're either not coming this triennium for a valid reason, i.e. they're not required, or they when you can expect to receive them.
Okay.
Yep.
Thanks.
Councillor Mark.
No, my apologies. I was going cross-eyed. I had something on the wrong line.
Debate. All those for? Dave, did you want to debate? No. Any against? Carried unanimously. Page 83.
Elected members at the briefing, the most recent briefing, there was a discussion, a presentation by Dale Ofsowski about the representation review, and this report responds to an indication from members at the briefing that there be a small reference group, if you like, using the word task force because that's the one available to us, but essentially a small reference group to provide input into the staff-led project for the review.
Could I... questions? Sorry. Gary. Yep.
Thank you, Andrew. Just to be quite clear, and I'm just reading what the report says, we have to do this. Is that correct?
We have to do the review.
Yep.
We don't have to have a task
force to do it. Okay, we have to do it by some mechanism. We have chosen to do it. We could just do it by a debate round here, couldn't we? Or we could.
Well, I want to be really clear. The task force has no decision-making power or direction-setting power at all. All the decisions will be made by council, and you'll be fully briefed at all decision points through a briefing and then through reports to this chamber.
So the task force can't bind us to anything? No, cool.
I thought we were going to recommend reducing the number of councillors to 3.
This task force doesn't consider councillor lunches?
No, Gary.
Because that needs to be...
outside of the
That
scope.
needs to be discussed. No, cool, thank you. That explains it. Thank you.
So could I just question why we need this task force when this, to me, is something really important to all elected members? This, this affects us all. We all should be involved in this. Do we really need a task force? And in terms of reference for this, when it can actually be done by briefing, in our briefings and through full council?
There is no requirement whatsoever. I can speak for staff when I say we are completely open to however elected members choose to do it. Dale felt, quite rightly so, that it was his obligation to point out to the people at the briefing the different ways different councils choose to approach these things, and he put forward a reference group as one of those options, but there is no requirement whatsoever to have one.
Andrew, I think at the briefing we had for this, didn't we informally decide to do the task force?
Yes.
Yeah. 3 of us weren't here.
Okay. Were you not there?
I'm just realising that we're just setting up more and more task forces, and the original concept was that we would address things as a group and as a whole, and it just appears to me that here's another one when this really could affect our futures as to how the city is set up and how we're represented, and this is really important to all of us.
You asked why a task force.
I'm asking why.
And I couldn't remember that you weren't there at the informal briefing we had. We decided to do that, but that's how it got to be a task force. I mean, you could be right in what you're saying, but that's how we got to be a task force.
So I'm questioning whether members really do want a task force for this, or whether we do it as a paper that comes to council. I guess I can test that through an amendment. Okay, sorry, Councillor Ange.
I was just going to say, look, I'm not. It doesn't worry me either way. It was just from a discussion at the briefing. I am booked in to still go down to Wellington on the 23rd with staff.
Yes.
To that seminar just to talk about it, but I can still do that anyway. Yeah, I'm happy. I don't think we need an amendment. Happy to go with whatever everyone wants. we're still going to get a good outcome either way, so.
That because I'm also on the task force, but I'm pretty relaxed about it as well. Yeah. Sorry, yeah, fair enough.
We were going around the table anti-clockwise, Deputy Mayor. Okay. Deputy Mayor, you did push your button first.
Yeah. Look, just the question is these are things you've got to do, but presumably a task force or however you do it can add in other things such as, whether you want to look at STV voting, community boards, etc., through the governance manager. There's stuff you have to do, but if you want to do anything else, logically you would consider that parallel at the same time. I don't know.
One of the first actions of the project group will be to bring to council the project plan that sets out exactly what the scope of the review and the timing and the intention behind it. I'd like to be clear that in my mind and understanding about how the proposed terms of reference would work, there would be no narrowing down of options at all by a task force. That's not appropriately done in a review such as this. All the decisions at all points need to be taken by full council. There may be some advantage in having a small group of people to talk to us about mechanisms for initial consultation, just some people to double check learnings from the Solgum seminars, things like that, but the intention's not in any way that this task force operate in the way that some of the others have in terms of where they've started with a broader scope and narrowed it down to options.
Yes, so basically this is a group of people that would be doing the work, because I can certainly caution council, I will in debate about the very haphazard amateur hour way we've done this in the past, in my view, and elected members just much to blame on that, how they handled it, but just so really this group technically could, if they had an instruction, could consider the other two factors. If we're looking at representation, obviously the legislation says that we have to consider whether or not we want ward system, number of councillors, and obviously we're required in terms of the issue of appropriate forms of Maori representation, but we could add in a review of the voting system, i.e. FPP to STV?
No, you can't, Councillor, and that was explained, Deputy Mayor, that was explained by Dale as the electoral officer at that presentation that you unfortunately couldn't attend. And that's because the decision that was taken at the last poll is binding on council for 6 years.
Oh, okay.
And so that's the only reason. Everything we are legislatively required to address will be addressed. And just to be really, really clear, if I may, not by the task force, by the staff-led project group, with Dale's expert support, and the task force, if it were established, would sit alongside to provide, I can't think of a better word than reference group, but a group to test ideas and timings for briefings. The poll says the next election has to also be by FPP as well, because that was the condition of the poll. Now there's an issue of ward system. Yeah. I'm just trying to remember. We're very clear that the two aspects that we're legislatively required to review this time around, you were at the briefing, weren't you, Councillor McPherson? And
but that's not the poll. If the poll said we had to stick with it for 6 years, that's fine. But it's been about 7 years since we had the poll already. So
Dale has advised. Oh, look, I'll double check Brendan's with Brendan tomorrow and check with my notes. But
I'm not suggesting we go back to that. But if that's the reason, that can't be right because the years are all wrong. We did that poll when Bob Simcock was mayor. That's how long ago it was.
No, this is more. That was the recent one, and I had arrived back. We had there was a poll. There was a poll. There was a decision on the ward system which bound us for 2 elections. That's now happened. And there was also a poll, and this is the critical question that we did, I think was concurrent with the fluoride. Some of you may recall the fluoride representative, a long time. But there was a poll also at the same time dealing with STV, which was subsequently defeated. So all I'm saying, to move along now through the chair, if the governance manager could just give us absolute clarity as to whether or not we can look at it. I then move to my next question, however, if we want to just have a general discussion around two wards, community boards, etc., community committees, where would that happen?
So that will be scheduled through the project plan. Those discussions will occur at briefings.
Right, because one of the things that I've been a critic of in the past was that we considered these things at separate times. Certainly the issue of Maori representation was considered separately to when we were, from memory, correct me Angela and Dave, when we were talking about ward systems, let alone number of councillors and all of that. So it was a problem. The intent of my question is to make sure that if we're going to do any of this at all, we try and do it as one-stop shop. We do it together.
Understood, Deputy Mayor. There are legislative timeframes. We are required to make decisions on Māori representation ahead of the decisions on wards, but that doesn't mean that we can't take an integrated approach to considering, and certainly the research that we'll need to make decisions on all those things won't occur in an ad hoc way. We'll plot that out at the beginning. And
the issue of some form of appropriate consultation, where does that fit in this process? Any process, whether it's all of council or a tightly focused working group?
Consultation with whom? Deputy?
Well, I mean, this is about electoral systems. There's obviously some opportunity for public comment.
Oh, there's complete opportunity for public comment.
And just help me, and I apologise I wasn't at the workshop, obviously.
I can say with confidence, Deputy Mayor, that all the matters that you have raised are on the project plan. We've taken expert advice of them, and they will be taken. They will be being worked through as we work through this project. The question that arose in relation to the task force was, how did elected members wish to engage with the project that's being run by staff in order to keep themselves well informed? And a series of potential options were put forward by Dale, one of which was that a small group of councillors might like to work alongside staff.
Because that's going to happen anyway, isn't it? Staff are going to do the work, so the issue is whether or not you want to add 2 or 3 of our colleagues there to assist in that process.
Yes, and there's pros and cons to that, which Dale went through at the briefing as well. So the decision's yours, councillors.
Councillor Dave.
Thanks, and just on the reason for the task force, it wasn't actually really being talked about as a task force. The meeting was being talked about as a reference group because we didn't want to have staff have to go off by themselves and think about what councillors would like to hear, and it was some people to give them a bit of a sounding board while they were going through their report construction. That was the purpose of it on that occasion. So, I mean, it's morphed into a task force. It'll probably be a full-blown committee by the time it comes back to the next meeting. But it wasn't meant to do the job of a task force and start everything from scratch. It was meant to give them some intellectual firepower. No.
That's nicely said, Councillor McPherson. And it may well be the case, elected members, that you choose to not deal with this in an official way, that those people have indicated that they're happy to be a sounding board, with your will and consent continue or act in that capacity, and we don't need to approve anything today. Or alternatively, you might be happy to leave staff to do the work based on the project plan that we bring to you, and knowing that we will keep you appraised of the work at every possible step of the way through briefings and council meetings.
Just as a matter of precedent, rightly or wrongly, I've asked a number of councillors to be a sounding board in terms of supporting staff in the 10-year plan process, in terms of reviewing documents, making sure they hit the mark in terms of what they expect to see when it comes to a briefing, just to try and make sure that when we go to briefings we maximise the use of time. So there is that option to follow in the same suit, which is effectively what the governance manager is referring to.
So the other question I had, I think the sounding board thing, personally think that's a fine way to do it, not to get too formal about it. But it's a bit like what Martin asked about consultation, because at some stage we should be seeking the input of the public on this, and whatever else happens, I'm just saying, please make sure that's written into what happens.
Yeah, it absolutely
apart from
is.
fluoride, nothing seems to excite the public more than a good old chance to reject STV and a few other things like that. Yeah.
There'll be processes for consultation, and also we're required to notify all these things as well. So we're legislatively bound by the way in which we do this.
We need to do it a bit
and
more.
there's some opportunities over and above that. Yeah.
Thanks.
Councillor Southgate.
Thank you, Mr Mayor. Just a couple of questions, isn't it? Questions. So at the workshop I raised the question that I see we are working with Māori. Are we also going to take this the soonest, earliest possibility to our GMA partners through that conduit as well?
Since then, our Amorangi Māori Muna has scheduled an item for the co-governance forum, and also we were to meet with the Runanga earlier this week to just socialise the idea and talk a little bit about the presentation and the legal requirements. Unfortunately, Muna's been sick this week, so that meeting's been deferred, but we have already acted to start moving Māori consultation forward.
Okay, I think it's excellent that there's a reference group to go through the information. Presume they'll be looking at some of the discussions of other councils around the country in terms of and local government New Zealand as well. Their considerations, because not everything's new all the time. The conversation about single transferable vote versus first past the post. There'll be a lot of conversation around that.
Yeah. Well, to be clear, we won't be making a decision on voting system this time because we're not.
When does that come up?
It comes up the election after next. So we're bound by the last decision for 6 years.
Absolutely bound by it, can't be.
Absolutely bound by it.
All right. Just in terms of keeping stakeholders informed, I just want to make sure that we don't get too far ahead of ourselves before we're. Before the rest of the governors around the table understand the background to the group. So I wouldn't like to think there'd be any public consultation before it touched with council as a whole.
I want to be really, for the sake of repeating myself, I want to be really clear here. The decisions around this will be taken by you. None of these decisions will be taken with staff. The role of staff here is to bring you the research, keep you legally safe, make you aware of what your legal obligations as the city's decision makers are on this, and then to enact and implement the decisions you take. So there's no filtering out before this stuff gets to you.
That's as I expected. It was just when I looked at Roman numerals 2 under number 1, the first bullet point, development communications plan, it seemed a little horse before the cart to start thinking about development and communications plan before it come back from council for council's full feedback, but we'll just leave it there.
Councillor Gary.
Thank you. On page 84, paragraph 11, talks about a review of representation arrangement will be undertaken as a management project. So I assume that means staff will write a report. Is that what that means?
Staff will do a lot of work that will lead to a report written by staff that will come to you. Yes.
Okay. And will that be... that won't fit... And does this have... This isn't special consultative issue? Is this a special consultation thing?
No. We need to demonstrate... So the ultimate decision is subject to judicial review. So it's very tightly process-led, and we need to be very transparent, and we need to document very well. So there are requirements for public notification, and there are opportunities, as Councillor McPherson has referred to, for any other form of engagement we want to do to satisfy ourselves that we have the information we need to make the decision. Okay. But anything we decide to do, even if it's to do nothing, needs to be publicly notified, and then the decision have the opportunity.
We're letting you know we're doing nothing.
Well, even if we stay.
Just in case you're wondering.
At that point, polls can be called for by the public, or they can be initiated by us.
Okay.
So the public gets to have a view of every decision.
I guess that's one of my questions was things like Maori representation at large or by ward, female balance, STVD.
No, LGBT. LGBT.
The AG community. People in wheelchairs, that sort of stuff. Does that require us to have a poll and things like that? It's like,
no, it doesn't require us to
but we have
a
in the
poll.
past on occasions.
And a poll can be demanded if certain thresholds are reached.
Okay, so the public could come to us and ask for, what do you call those things? The citizens-initiated referendum or something, yeah. Okay. Okay, so the key thing is that we want to cover all our bases at the most efficient and effective way we can. Okay, and so the paragraph 11 would suggest that you're going to come back with a recommendation to her, or sorry, you staff are going to come back with a recommendation saying we think the best way to do this is this, this and this. Or are you wanting a decision from us now?
No, not wanting to. So we'll come back with a series of reports. It's a very big project, so we'll come back with a series of reports with staged decisions for you to tell us what you want to happen from there. Yeah.
Thank you.
Councillor Dave.
And you're going to come back to us anyway, regardless of whether it's what's set up or not set up. So if we let this resolution, for instance, recommendations lie on the table or just didn't vote on it, you'd be going off consulting with who you felt you needed to, including those 3 that have offered to help.
That's correct, and other people that may be in other elected members that may be in other forum where it's appropriate for a conversation to be had or an issue to be raised or research to be undertaken, etc., etc. So what I'm going to do in terms of project lead doesn't substantially change at all, whether or not this group's set up or not.
Could I suggest through you, Your Worship, that we do let it lie on the table, because it doesn't seem necessary to set up a formal task force.
Well, no one's moved or seconded, so.
Before we get into resolutions, because of the meeting, if I'm hearing, I mean, I think Angela, you mentioned through the chair, you mentioned you're going to a seminar. Yeah. And what is that? Sorry. What is the seminar?
So Solgum is hosting a day-long seminar just on what the representation review is. It's Introduction 101 to representation review for anybody from a council who wishes to attend. You might recall I sent an email out saying who Brendan and I are attending, and I sent an email out to see if any other elected members would like to attend with us. Councillor O'Leary, I think probably given the conversation we had at briefing about a potential reference group, indicated that she'd be willing to go. And I think that's great, because then you've got both a colleague and the governance unit that are in a position
it just seems to me, I think there's incredible use in someone like Councillor O'Leary, Pascoe, Bunting, being part, even if it's fairly semi-formal, because this is a reference point. Doesn't stop me, and I have strong views, as everyone knows, on ward systems and STVs and community boards, but I retain an open mind, of course, but which I do. But I think in terms of the process, because obviously that's really useful that Angela's going down with you, because she will bring a different set of criteria and networks and connections, and I would argue that's useful. So just in terms of Councillor McPherson's, this lie on the table, do I take it that nothing precludes you, if they continue to offer, people like Councillor Pascoe, Leary, Bunting, etc., would from time to time touch base with you? Is that how it would work?
Yes.
Well, it's just I just have to say, colleagues, I like that approach, because as I've found with a number of debates on this council, there's a huge danger, and even the questions that are flowing now shows that there's a degree of a variety of knowledge, and from all of us, myself included, and it just seems to me that tight staff group working with some key councillors would be quite useful to all of us, just so that when you do come back with a series of reports, we are absolutely across what obviously are our options and what are the legal requirements.
I think it's a good point. Whether it's done informally, I'm quite happy actually with the idea of an informal group. I think the key point here is that there are elected members that have, because they're interested, understand in a little bit more detail what's going on with the project team, and they're able to initiate conversations with their colleagues as well as with us. And I think that's the real advantage here, because they're really important decisions that you're going to be asked to make, and knowing that we've got the best possible communication channels through briefings, through informal conversations, through an informal reference group, and through council meetings, I think is very useful.
And I think as Gary Mallett, Councillor Mallett and others point out, that if you get it wrong, you have an immediate judicial challenge, which has happened in this city. And if in fact a group of citizens feel in certain areas that you haven't got it right, they can then legally, quite separate from the CIR process, petition. I think it's an X percentage of people can launch a petition that compels you to have a poll on a specific issue. So what I'm saying through the chair, it's in all of our interest to make sure that we do get the process right.
Okay, so we'll move to the next paper on page 87, unless somebody wants to move that.
I think it's appropriate that the report from the governance manager be received, and the contents of the contents of the workshop just be noted. All right, and the contents of the workshop be noted. And we have a general understanding of direction of travel. I'll move that way.
Okay, all those for, any against? Carried. Page 87. Sorry, Deputy Mayor. Okay, so we've got Becca on this one, please.
It's a governance generated report, but Councillor McPherson may even choose to speak to this. It's a tidying up for the governance structure of a change to the terms of reference for the one of our regional partnership committees, just to acknowledge a change in the chairing arrangements.
Okay, Deputy Mayor Gallagher. You're gone, sorry. So Dave. No, sorry, your name was still up on the board, so we'll go to Dave.
Look, it wasn't a big deal. It didn't need the committee, for the committee to run, it didn't need us to get into complicated co-chairing arrangements, provided it was only for this 3 years. So after talking about it with Leo, that's what we went with, just to move things along and not to get into arguments then about who was going to chair first and who was going to chair second, that rubbish. Because bearing in mind that Councillor Russ Remington doesn't really know how to chair anyway, so it was all...
We're not in confidential yet.
Oh, there.
Okay,
yes,
so
right.
Deputy Mayor moving, Dave seconding. All those for, any against? Carried unanimously. Okay, now we move to page 94. Amy? Paula? Sorry?
Someone move the recommendation.
Okay, got a mover, Councillor Mark, seconded by Councillor James. All those for, any against? Carried unanimously. And now we move to public excluded. So we need a mover, James, seconded by Deputy Mayor Gallagher. All those for, any against?